One thing I want to mention is the mono rigs that I'm using. The stiffness of the material or the softness of the material is going to be dependent on what technique I'm using. So with streamers, and even though most of the streamers or jig streamers in this case that I'm using are competition style hooks with a very thin hook point, even these larger size 8, 10s, in some cases even 12 competition hook wire is still significantly thicker than a lot of the 16s and 18s that I use, the wire point that is. So when you have a rod tip like any Euro rod that has a lot of flex or a lot of give, and when you're jigging streamers with a Euro rod, a lot of times you're not only using the line him, but also you're using the rod tip to set the hook. And remember, the longer the rod and the softer the rod, the more bend, and the more bend that occurs in that rod, the less energy you're creating. The more energy the rod absorbs, and the less energy you're actually putting out there into the fly while you're making your hook set. So one of the last things I want to do when I'm fishing larger gauge wire with a Euro rod is a mono that has lots of stretch, because not only are you losing power with the flex and the flexness of the rod, but also you're losing power with the stretch of the monofilament. And that's why I like using mono like Maxima. It can be Ultra Green in this case, or the Chameleon, but it's got virtually no stretch. So the only power I'm losing is within the rod tip. And I have found by switching exclusively over with this rod to a stiffer butt section of like Maxima, followed by my cider and by my tippet, I'm going to have a good hook set. But so often when you have a soft rod and you have maybe all cider material, maybe 40 feet of all soft cider material, and you go to set that hook with that streamer, you'll feel, once you create that hook set, you'll feel the line or the mono continue to stretch all the way through the hook set. You're losing power. So by switching over to all thick mono or stiff mono with Euro streamers, my hook sets have been significantly better. And then when I do decide to fish like ultralight small nymphs where I want to see more of that presentation, I want actually that mono along with my cider to have a little bit more wiggle so I can see that nervous twitch tighten or hesitate, my mono rig is going to go to an all soft material. But especially with streamers, I cannot emphasize that enough. When you're fishing mono streamers or jigging streamers with a mono rig and a softer rod, try to use as stiff of a mono as you possibly can. That is going to help you out immensely with the amount of energy and power you're putting into your hook set. So I hope this helps, and enjoy the rest of the film. Take care. Current streamer box, just a bunch of little scalp snacks, mostly olive, a couple olive and brown, some white, and I do have 1 or 2 Crelexes here, but keep it very simple. The only thing I do change a little bit within these flies is the bead size. When I'm fishing really skinny shallow pocket water, say for example on Spring Creek, I may go with like a 4 or like a 4.5 millimeter bead like you see here. But when you're fishing some of these deeper, softer sections of water, I like a heavier bead, and often a lot of my bead sizes may go all the way up to like a 6 or a 6.5 millimeter. So one of these pitches with the mono and the heavily weighted jig streamer we can do is kind of like an underhand pitch, where basically the forearm drifts, kind of just pulling a short distance, maybe the fly is hanging maybe 2-3 feet underneath the rod tip. We're kind of moving in a level line, and then right at the very end, we're just going to kick the wrist upward, allowing that fly to actually have an upward trajectory, giving us distance. So all we're going to do is just kind of just drift this and then pull, drop. Head shake. It's
that's a good fish. That's a good fish. Oh man. Nice fish. Yeah. False hope. Yeah. Love it. Oh yeah, exactly. Yeehaw! So one of the things we have here is kind of a shallow contour right off the bank, and then it drops quickly. When I'm placing the fly on that shallow edge, I don't want to go over the top, create speed with this heavily weighted jig. Otherwise, if I go over the top, come down at a pretty steep, fast angle, those flies are going to plummet quickly and grab the bottom. Instead, what I'm going to do is just do an underhand pitch, a basic spin cast, where you're going to pitch up and then almost kind of keep tension as the fly drops, but you actually control the rate of the fall. So instead of coming down and just hammering it, all I'm going to simply do is just come underneath, flip, and then slowly lower and drop that fly, but you do it at a controlled rate. When you're fishing deeper, faster pocket water, not as important, but fishing skinny water like this, if I come straight down, plummet that fly, one, if I slacken, and two, I'm going to grab bottom and hang up. So by just simply going under the hand, flipping, I can control the drop and have that sighter off the water and just have a nice presentation, allowing my heavily weighted jig to reach the shallow banks and have control the moment it lands. Working depths, trying to go shallow, not so much. Go another foot or two deeper, stick a fish. Get the fly down into the strike zone. Whether you're nymphing or in this case, streamer fishing. Yep. If I stop my rod tip too high on this cast, or any cast, and when I do that, it kind of puts me out of position. I'm kind of keeping the rod tip high. I'm putting a lot of drag on the fly because of the high rod tip, and also I'm out of position to set the hook because my hand's already kind of at this height where I have really nowhere else to go. One of the things you can simply do is, if you find yourself out of position, just make one long strip as you lower the rod tip and reach. You just don't want to cast and then quickly drop the rod tip and incorporate all that slack in that presentation. Instead, make the cast, and then one long strip as you reach, maintain a nice cool control. Then you can go back to a strip, you can do a hand and twist retrieve, but just keeping that rod tip a little bit lower, you're in a better position. Incorporate the hook set, and then also that lower rod tip allows the streamer or nymph in some situations to actually drift a little more freely. So keep that hand as low as you can. So when that strike occurs, then you've got the area, you've got all that leverage to set the hook. Reach, one long strip, reach out, and jig, jig. Right there, yep, missed the fish. But that's the idea. One other aspect, just had another bump, just hanging that fly there, of this is that when you're jigging, again, we're trying to do this with a controlled lift and drop. One of the things I'm not looking for is that when I make my cast, I don't want to see lots of slack in that sighter. Instead, what we're doing basically is casting a heavily weighted fly. In this case, this is like a 6.3, I think, millimeter tungsten bead. It's going to have enough weight. It's going to anchor itself. And all I'm doing is maintaining tension as I'm dropping it, and then also as I'm lifting it. But really, slack is not accumulating too much during this presentation. It's just a nice controlled lift and a controlled drop, giving me control and contact from start to finish. Just nice smooth lift and drop. And if you are lifting and dropping and your fly is not anchoring itself correctly, meaning you go up, you lift, and then you slowly drop, and you don't feel that tight connection, chances are you don't have a heavy enough bead. This water is not that fast, it's not that deep, but still I like a bead for this depth and this current that's right a little over 6 millimeters. It just gives me a nice controlled lift and drop. You shouldn't be so worried about hanging up on bottom because of the weight. Another little fish. But the reason being is you're controlling the depth. You're not allowing this fly to actually have free will. You're hanging it underneath the rod tip, you're lifting and you're dropping, but it's always under the tension of the rod tip. It's not freely drifting, at least the way I'm doing right here. So I'm just hanging it, literally hanging it and dropping, lifting and dropping. So we want to make sure we have enough weight so when we do that lift and drop, it's going to correct itself at the end. Well, here it comes. This is why you gotta dangle. Unbelievable. You know, this is just, yeah. Sometimes in the wintertime, you just gotta be, this one wrapped itself. You gotta be just a little more patient with your presentation. It just takes a little more time for things to materialize. This fish hit the fly 3 times. Good looking fish too. 3 times hit it, and then I hung it and just kind of held it in front of its face. But that's a nice quality brown trout, only because I was patient. I didn't rip it out of there, and I just kept the fly in play. What a gorgeous fish. Thank you. What a way to end the day.